Hey, everybody, welcome back to the 50 podcast. It's your host, Haley. And today we are here with Monica Crawford, or you may know her as 50 Fierce and Fit. You may recognize her from social media, but the real Monica is a former law enforcement officer, a coach, a trainer, an author, a public speaker, an outspoken advocate for women in law enforcement, and so much more. And I can't wait to learn everything about you. And I know my listeners are too. So, for our listeners who don't know who you are yet, can you give us a quick bio just about yourself? And then we'll peel back the layers of all the things we talked about above and more.
Yeah, so I think you hit the high points. My name's Monica Crawford. I am from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Currently married to my husband, who's also in law enforcement. We've got a mini farm of sorts. It's three dogs, a cat, rabbit, and horse. And we enjoy some some good food, good coffee, and craft breweries every once in a while. So that's the personal side of things. And then of course, I'm sure we'll get into the professional side of things here shortly.
See, I've already learned so much about you. Like, how would I
Yeah.
have known you had a farm? Like, that is crazy. It's so
Loosely.
interesting. What?
I said loosely. It's not really a farm. I
Loosely,
call it a mini farm as a
a
joke,
mini
but
farm.
yeah.
But also, like you being married to another first responder, that's something, I didn't know either. So it's nice to know. So we're going to go over your foundation in law enforcement, and then we're going to talk about how you got to where you are today and all of that and get a little deeper. But one question I like to ask every single one of my guests, the same question is because I like to know how you got to where you're at and just kind of like peel into your background. So tell us about your family life and growing up. How was that?
Yeah. So I'm actually originally from the Kansas City, Missouri area, about 30 minutes north of Kansas City. Big Chiefs fan.
I was going to
Sorry.
say, go Chiefs.
Yeah, sorry if you're a hater. Big Chiefs fan, because I grew up around it. Um, Grew up in a rural area. Still have the horse, of course. So I grew up riding horses and barrel racing, and also got into gymnastics at the age of 3. And then was a competitive gymnast for a total of 20 years. When that ended in college, I competed as a Division I gymnast for Bowling Green State University, towards the end of my career. But yeah, grew up in a small country town. Had a graduating high school class of about 300 for some perspective. I don't know if that's big or small for some. I know more metropolitan areas, they're like, what is that? Um, but yeah, pretty country rural beginnings, I suppose.
Okay, okay. And when I was doing my little research on you, I did see that you were a gymnast. That's so cool. You could have been like in like a Power Ranger, like in the movies. You could have been, you could have been like doing backflips and like being like a cop fighter doing like gymnastics. Can you still do some like flips and stuff?
So what's funny is actually a lot of our bigger meets, like we would compete at the Navy Pier in Chicago a couple years, and they a lot of times they would be recruiting for Cirque du Soleil from those meets. So if you talk about publicizing it, there's a couple gymnasts that I'm familiar with who went into Cirque du Soleil after they retired from competition.
Oh, wow.
I
That's
can still walk.
awesome.
I can still walk on my hands. If you put me on a trampoline, I can have a heyday. But as far as flipping on the ground anymore, the hard ground, that's a no-go.
I would like to say I was a gymnast too, but I think the only thing I ever was able to do was like a back walk. But I think every girl growing up wanted to be a gymnast.
Yeah.
Um, well, thanks for sharing that. So, what inspired you to become a police officer? So you grew up in this rural area, you're a gymnast, you have a horse. How the hell did you become a police officer?
It's kind of a funny story because it's not a direct path, by any means. So we'll tie this together full circle moment, or at least you can kind of see the foreshadowing here. When I was younger, I used to talk to my mom about wanting to own a business, about wanting to own either my own gymnastics gym or like a horse training facility or something like that. So when I went into college, which was 2009, it was the height of the recession. I was looking at either going into business administration or criminal justice. And of course, being 18 years old, I'm like, why would I do business? We're in a recession. Because obviously I didn't think very far into the future. Um, So I went into criminal justice, thinking that I was going to go into law school eventually. So I was on the pre-law track. Got like a year or two into college and was and had to go into our local municipal court to view court and some of those things as a part of the degree, and was like, this is boring. This is monotonous. Like I don't want to do the same thing over and over again. So I kind of deviated from that and got my bachelor's in criminal justice. And I actually graduated a little bit early because I still had a year of eligibility left to compete. And so I had to figure out what to do with that final year. So I rolled into the master's program within my last semester of competing in gymnastics, and kind of just decided to go the master's route because I was like, what can it hurt? I still have to stay NCAA eligible to compete. So I rolled into that program early. From there, I was thinking I had done an internship in probation in a municipal court probation office and really enjoyed that. And so I was thinking I was going to go working into the courts. Started working in the courts as a probation intern, became a court clerk. During that time, for whatever reason in the market, it was Northwest Ohio. I was in the Toledo area. It took me 8 months, I think, with a master's degree to find a full-time job in 2014.
Wow,
Yeah, it was a rough time.
that's
Straight out of
crazy.
college, didn't have any experience other than my internship. That was probably the only negative about being a student athlete is you can't work because your
Right.
sport is your job. So you don't get the experience before you graduate. So a lot of that was, well, you don't have the experience enough to work for us. And so I found my way into a mental health position as a case manager. With a mental health facility, which I loved. It was like drinking from a fire hose. So I didn't last long. It was like a year that I was there. And
Yeah.
then found my way into another court position as a pre-sentence investigator, and then decided to move. I was in the Toledo area. I decided to move to Tulsa then because it was way too cold. I was tired of the cold. I was kind of isolated up there because all of my friends from college had moved away, gone back home, and I was just kind of chilling up there. Didn't have any family, friends, like nobody. And so I was like, well, this sucks. It's too cold. I need to move. And I started to apply to state probation jobs. Applied to Missouri, Arkansas, and Oklahoma, and landed in Oklahoma. And so moved to Tulsa and started working probation and parole, which is a law enforcement position here. It is a sworn law enforcement position. You have to go through the state police academy to be a probation and parole officer here. It's just
Okay.
it's under the hub of the Department of Corrections. So that's the long story of how I made it eventually to law enforcement. And then from there, started working a part-time patrol position with a state agency, and then eventually transitioned into full-time policing after that.
And I'm sure it was a little bit more exciting than being in the courts,
It
being an
was.
officer.
It was. I enjoyed working probation and parole. I wish there were some little bit differences that from the position that I had, but it was really neat because it was a mix of everything. You got to go deal with the courts, you got to go to court, you got to go talk to the prosecutors and the DAs and the court clerks, and on that back end of it. But you also had the law enforcement capacity of if somebody needed to be arrested, you could arrest them in the office, you could go serve warrants.
Oh,
It was
okay.
it was a kind of a good mix of everything, and I really enjoyed that job for what it was.
Okay, that's cool. I didn't know you could do those other things too. That's cool. So so you get into becoming a police officer and you end up working full time. Tell us your background in policing. Like what units have you worked and what has been your favorite and what has been your least favorite?
So when from being full-time police, it was 3.5 years, which seems long and short at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, I was assigned to patrol, with the part-time position and also the full-time position. I spent time on day shift and evening shift. I was crisis intervention trained. I made it to the crisis negotiation team. Unfortunately, it was like 2 months before I resigned, because it had been in the works, and then kind of it was just at the point where I decided to leave because of everything else that was going on. But I made it onto the crisis negotiations team. I was also an active shooter instructor. It's called, the acronym is LASER. It's Law Enforcement Active Shooter Emergency Response. And it's taught through LSU. And so I was certified to teach through them, and I did a lot of instruction with the state training team that we had at the time,
Wow.
which I really enjoyed. And that was actually separate from the department. It was
Yeah,
something
that's really cool.
I was able to kind of wiggle my way on to separate of the department, other than the department putting me through the training. So I was able to travel around the state and teach the active shooter stuff for a year or two, which was fun because, of course, we've got some sim rounds and shot boxes and all of the
Yeah.
real life stuff going on, role players, all that stuff. So it was really fun to be able to meet and teach across the state. And then currently now I'm still a law enforcement instructor and I teach for a company called Leoden, which is my own fit for duty course, which encompasses kind of what I do with my business as well. So,
Awesome. And what did you, what was your least favorite part about like working patrol or being a police officer?
as far as the call types go, the municipal agency that I was with was a suburb. And so you have more affluent people there. And you get the barking dog calls and the my neighbor's tree limb fell in my yard, come do
Oh
something
my
about.
God, yeah.
So I would say those were not great as far as
Yeah,
with the conflict resolution that other people weren't willing to do on their own. But of course, that's kind of what the police do a little bit, right?
yeah.
Um, so those not so much. You had to put a smile on your face and try to at least make that a positive interaction and leave the person feeling better than when you got there. Um,
Yeah.
which was fun working through that challenge in its own way. But of course, when those call types come out, quite often it gets old quick.
I remember my very first call as a police officer, and it was a tree branch blocking the road. And I was like, wait a minute, this is not what I signed up for. I signed up for like all the cool, crazy stuff. This, I had to like stand there and help direct traffic around a tree branch. I was like, this is not it. What? Um, so you're a public speaker and you speak about a lot of your experiences, all encompassing, at conferences and on podcasts like with me today. What inspires you to be a voice for mental health struggles, for women in law enforcement, and for just the overall health and wellness of people in the first responding field?
So, unfortunately, I would say, I mean, I had a lot of positive experiences in law enforcement, but it evened out with probably the negative experiences in law enforcement, which I've seen through my coaching business that are very common. It's a lot of the same common struggles that women, especially the guys, deal with it too. So I don't want to say they don't see it, but that women especially deal with. And for one thing, it breaks my heart. Like it breaks my heart that I went through it, of course, because it completely rerouted my career and my life, which has been a good thing. Um, but it breaks my heart to see other women go through the same thing I went through. So for me, it's more of let's let's call it out, let's talk about it. Because one of the lines that I put on the back of my book, Thriving Inside the Thin Blue Line, is that we're going to talk about the things that end up on an Instagram meme that get made fun of that we know that happen all the time, but nobody actually wants to do anything about.
Yep.
So let's talk about the slimy sergeant who hits on all the rookies because that happened to me. Let's talk about the bullying and the constant criticism and all of these things, which people don't want to hear about when it hits them in the face. I've triggered some people with it and I've seen it come back at me, unfortunately, which of course I try to take with some grace and compassion because I know there's something that's bothering them under the surface, otherwise they wouldn't have quite the reaction that they do. But really it's kind of an inspirational and motivational take on let's give you some validation. You're not crazy for feeling the way you do. Because often, especially as women, I think we get really we're already isolated because there's not many of us. And then we get isolated even more if we're dealing with a lot of these challenges and struggles. And the old cop mentality is suck it up, buttercup, deal with it. This is what you're here to deal with. Well, yes and no. Yes and no. I'm not going to say it should be rainbows, but there's a lot of it that shouldn't be happening, or at least we should be working to change. So it's more validating those struggles, but also like giving some motivation and some inspiration and also resources of like, okay, well, maybe you can't change your department. It's going to be really hard for one person to change an entire department. Let's be real about it. But there's steps that you can take to make your life better, to make yourself feel better, so that you're not chained to the job, where you're not just kind of like we talked about that survival mode. It's not just eat, sleep, work, repeat, where you're suffering inside almost because you're like, well, I can't do this for my family, or I can't go to this event because I'm working overtime, or I'm getting indexed to come back to shift, or fill in the blank. It's more of you have more control than you think you do. I'm just here to remind you on how to take control of that and also giving you small ways to make it fit into your already crazy life.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And as a female in law enforcement, I can relate to everything that you said. And I assume that most women can relate to at least something, and it's just the reality. So for new females who, because I do have a lot of listeners that do listen to the pod because they're wanting to become a police officer. What advice would you have for them if they're about to start the academy or doing the process or they're brand new? What's some good advice you would give to a female so that they, can maybe change the trajectory of what they may or may not experience?
Yeah, so there's three things that I came up with when I saw this question. And first and foremost, do the work. Like show up ready. Know that this is going to be a challenging career. Know that you are essentially the underdog coming in. You're going to be doubted. You're going to have more obstacles than most. And again, not knocking it, let's call it for what it is. You're going to have to be fitter. You're going to have to be smarter. You're going to have to be on your toes, probably more so, because you do have something to prove. Women are the weaker sex. We have to be stronger than the guys to be on an equal playing field with them, realistically speaking. My partner has to be able to deadlift, who's a male, has to be able to pick up a 200-pound person just as much as I have to be able to pick up a 200-pound person. So put in the work to be fit, to be ready, to know everything there is to know. Do your research on the department you want to join. Do some ride-alongs, get some insight on what you're getting into, but also do the work leading up to it to be fit, be in shape, because that's
Mhm.
probably the biggest hurdle is the fitness side of things when getting into the career. So find a coach, find somebody to help you, find a program, find a CrossFit gym. I don't care. Do what it is that you need to not only be in shape, but be fitter than the rest of your academy going in there. Like that should be the goal in theory. So that
Yeah.
you already have one leg up when you go in there. So it's like, oh, like first impression is okay, she's fit. That's not going to
Yeah.
be a problem. That's not going to be a problem. Great.
Yeah.
Um, so do the work going into the career. Once you get in, I would say find a mentor or a role model, and that's someone that you can trust. Someone you can lean on, someone that's not going to rat you out, someone you don't have to worry about being drama. Those types of things that gives you that reassurance. Because even in my career, it's unfortunate. I have two people that come to mind who were FTOs of mine who were my people that I leaned on there, who were very trustworthy at the time, but unfortunately, once I separated, they decided not to continue talking to me. Um, but at the time, they were the people that were like, I see what you're going through. Just take a breath, like keep doing what you're doing. You're doing fine. Because when all the criticism came in, I started doubting myself and questioning myself. And they're like, no, like you're good. Just keep doing what you've been doing. And if not for that, like I probably would have left a lot sooner. Because I had like that confidence and that positivity loop like coming back at me, at least every once in a while. So find the mentor, find the role model that's going to kind of help you move through your career and at least be a sounding board for you of yes, you're doing great, or not. I mean, maybe if it's like you have a question, you need help, just find that person. Find your people. I have in the same light of a person who I don't talk to any longer. I found a lifelong friend there who I'm still friends with, and she just retired as a very accomplished 20 plus year detective there. Um, that's the one thing she told me in my academy was find your people.
Yeah.
Find your people. And then the last one I would say would be stay true to yourself. It's really hard because there's so much outside input in your career, whether it's internal, whether it's external, whether it's politics, whether it's your family, friends, whatever. You have to stay true to yourself. And at the end of the day, you have to make the decisions based on what's true to you, what feels right in your heart, what aligns with your morals and your values. It has to be true to yourself because you're the one who has to live with your decisions and go to bed at night and sleep soundly, defending and knowing and trusting the decisions that you made. If you make a decision based on somebody else and then you have to live with the consequences of it because it didn't sit right with you, that's really unfortunate. And that's an unfortunate place to be in because then it starts just the loop of questioning yourself and kind of that confidence. But at the end of the day, if you can be confident in your decisions and how you are showing up every day, then that's going to make all the difference in your own self-care and also in your career. Because not many people can come up and knock somebody who's confident is like, nope, I'm making this decision because of X, Y, and Z. Here's why I can articulate this. If you don't agree with it, sorry, here's what we're doing. And that could be on a call, it could be off duty. I mean, it doesn't matter. But that's probably the most challenging thing to do is to try and push back some of those opinions, those negative thoughts, all of those things to be like, no, this feels good to me. I'm going to stick with it.
That like literally you hit the nail on the head with all three of those. I made a video recently about like advice that I would give. And it one of them was obviously be yourself, same as what you said. And the other one of the other pieces of advice was exactly what you said, find mentors. Find strong, and I said find strong female mentors, but I think it's important to like male mentors can be amazing as well.
Mhm.
And I love that you said that because I have I'm not mentioning all the amazing men that have helped me in this job and have had my back. So it's definitely any mentor that has your back and that, can help you, that you can call when you're on a call and you don't know what the hell to do, that you can pick up the phone and trust that they're not going to judge you and say, like, hey, I have this situation, instead of calling your supervisor, you can call them, that's a great
Yep.
person to lean on. But the first thing that you said, is definitely important, and it's something that I need to work on, and I think a lot of other females need to work on, is like your physical strength. And um you can't you can't deny if a woman walks in and they're tough as nails. I mean, you can't deny it. So I love those 3 points. I wish I could clip that and just like put it somewhere. Like, it is amazing. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's going to be incredible for my listeners. So we're going to get to the nitty gritty. So you mentioned it a few times, but you decided to leave law enforcement.
Mhm.
Can you tell us about this decision and why you did it?
Yes. So the full story is in the book as far as everything from start to finish within my law enforcement career. So obviously, I encourage if you're struggling in law enforcement or
Yes.
you just want a different perspective, pick up that book. It's on Amazon. It's called Thriving Inside the Thin Blue Line. But as far as my decision to leave law enforcement, a lot of it was the decision to pull out of full-time law enforcement were the challenges that I experienced within that short time, that 3.5 years that I was within that department. Long story short, it started with the academy, just being made to feel like nothing I was doing was correct or was the right way. It's actually an emotional abuse term called moving the goalposts. It's like the carrot keeps moving, that you're never gonna achieve the carrot because they keep
Yep.
changing the standard that they're holding you to. So you start to feel like you're crazy in essence because you're like, well, I can't do anything right. Why am I here? Um, I was injured in the academy. I had a torn rotator cuff that happened in week 2 of a 26-week academy, which I believe was 100% preventable. Unfortunately, we had a training officer who didn't have any background in physical fitness who was given the assignment to run an academy. Not necessarily knocking the guy, which people think I'm absolutely bashing him when I say that. Like, no, I'm stating facts. I am stating
Yeah.
facts.
No, that's true.
Um,
Even you saying that, it's like half the people that taught half the classes in my academy, like no matter what it was, had no experience. They're just like sent there to
yes.
teach.
So
Yeah.
I like to throw in a positive with that individual of he was a good instructor when it came to the things that he knew what he was doing with, which for him was a SWAT background. So anything with like building clearing, like on the range, guns, like all that stuff, like he was a great instructor. I'm just like, you have no business being our like our main like physical training, anything. So he didn't know what he was doing. I think he got upset because a couple times I called him out on a couple things because I did know what I was doing. Because at the time I had been a CrossFit trainer for 7, 8 years. And of course, my entire 20-year background of gymnastics. I was like, this doesn't make sense, but okay. Um, Ended up having to get surgery right after the academy was over. Went straight to the desk in light duty coming out of the academy, and then was released to FTO after only 6 weeks of physical therapy and still was having pain in my shoulder at the time. So I was nervous as hell because I was like, I hope my shoulder doesn't just twist off my body the next
Oh
call
my
I get
God.
into
Yeah.
with somebody. Um, so that was that the academy itself was challenging. My FTO process was fantastic. Loved all my FTOs. Unfortunately, after that FTO process ended, some of those people were not quite the stand-up individuals I thought they were. But as far as patrol officers and training officers, I have no complaints with what they did. So that was a positive experience for me, thankfully. Getting into patrol, it was dealing with more of the internal issues as far as just the environment. It was a very toxic environment. The shift itself was more leading to criticism and bullying. They would screenshot my pictures on Facebook and send them and draw on them and send them around the police department. Um, so it's like you're just like I don't understand. And at the time, being a female rookie and being the only female on day shift, it was kind of just like, well, I'm gonna keep to myself. This is like the gnat flying in my ear that I can't get rid of, but we're gonna ignore it because at the time you're like, well, this is not a big deal. Like, why would I ruffle feathers about this? When really it probably was a bigger deal than what I made it out to be. And I think that's a lesson for most women in law enforcement. We try to minimize the big things because we're told to be quiet,
Yep.
in my experience. So working through those challenges of day shift, I got to evening shift, had a sergeant who tried to somewhat take me under his wing, ended up being with not great intentions, was trying to date me, was trying to hit on me, sent me an inappropriate text, and of course, I'll leave the details to the book, so you got to read the book to see
Yeah.
what that
Oh,
was
yes.
about. Um, Sent an inappropriate text, and then all of a sudden, and then that's when I started dating my now husband. We also met at that department, and we tried to keep that hush hush for as long as we could until, of
Yeah.
course, it just comes out because it does. Um, I think when that sergeant found out I was dating my husband, that's when things went downhill for me, because I don't think he was too happy about it. So I had applied for an emergency response team and also to become an FTO at the time, both of which that sergeant was the head over and of course got cut out of both of them.
Wow.
So kind of saw the writing on the wall. Then towards the end of my time there, I found myself in three different disciplinary issues in the span of 6 weeks after never having any issue like in my life before, not even in police, like in my life, with any sort of disciplinary issue other than like a letter in my file for an at-fault collision on duty, which it is what it is.
Yeah, it
Um,
happens. Yeah.
yeah. And so that was at the time where I was like, all right, well, we need to figure out what's happening next, and whether I'm going to stay or go. But during that time, that's when I could feel my mental health just like on a downslide. And it was like I got to get out or we got to figure something out to remedy this because at this point, like nobody wants me here. Like I was very confident in the fact that it felt that nobody wanted me there at the time. And I was like, why am I fighting to stay here if nobody wants me here? That's just silly. So I ended up resigning and moving out of that department, which is the time when the time I started my business as well. But that part-time agency that I was with before even going to the full-time agency, I was able to go back and work with them part-time again, which was a state agency. And those guys that I worked, men and women that I worked with there were absolutely fantastic. Like I have nothing negative to say about them as people. They were always very supportive. And I was so grateful that they took me back. And they were actually willing to take me full time. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm gonna run the business thing and see how this goes. And then if I need to, it was kind of keeping my foot in the door as well. Of like, if I want to
Yeah.
go back full time, like I'm still commissioned, I can work part time. I can kind of keep my schedule however I want it. As far as working part-time, they pretty much let you set your hours if you're working part-time because they're just happy to have your help essentially.
Yeah.
And so I kept my foot in the door there for two more years, and then this literally a month ago was when I just decided to step out and be done, because I don't think at this point I'm going back into law enforcement unless it's like the perfect position, which would be hard to find. So it was fun for a more years to be there. The state agency is a very fun job. It's working up on Grand Lake, which is in northeast Oklahoma, big old lake up in Grand Lake. So they're lake patrol, and then they're also river patrol for
Oh,
the
cool.
Illinois River. So a lot of what I did was working with the fun patrol officers down there, and also like the river rats. Like you're dealing with the river rat crew, which is entertaining in and of itself. After
I
a
love
while.
it.
after a while you get run down because you get running call to call pretty hot with drunks and 110-degree heat.
Oh,
Um with fights, with medical calls, with you name it, people jumping off of bridges. Watched an old boy he eat shit playing Dizzy Bat one day. Just just like pure entertainment. Plus, it makes me laugh. This is kind of a side note, but it makes me laugh being out in rural Oklahoma, especially. It's kind of like the Wild West when you get onto rural Oklahoma agencies. And so we're like running code on gravel, and I'm like in the passenger seat, like holding
like,
on for dear
whoa, yeah,
life.
I love it.
Like it's pure on entertainment. So it was, yeah, I really love that job. That was fun. It was a fun job. So I went back and worked for them for 2 years. Even the summer, they have an off-road park that they patrol too. So they've got two razors that they patrol on. So I got to get out in the razor a couple times too, which was of course
So
entertaining.
fun.
You just come home covered in dirt, but you're like whatever. Uh, but yeah, it was a good time. But
That's
even still,
awesome.
I was kind of just like patrol's not serving me anymore. So I just decided to step away last month.
When you decided to leave the first agency, this is more of a this is not one of my questions, but
It's fine.
yeah. Did you try to like save it? Did you like ask for like a meeting with anyone? Did you tell anyone what was going on? Or were you just like, they're not gonna hear me and I'm just gonna save my mental health and I'm gonna be out? Because I know a lot of women, including myself, have gone through very similar things. And and I think you mentioned it. It's like when you want to speak up, we're told to be silent. And if we speak up, we're the rat and the one that, it said something, and then we're looked at as non-trustworthy or whatever. So did you try to say something or did you not feel like there was anyone you could even talk to?
I had my few people that I spoke with on patrol that were other officers with me, and kind of confided in them. But I also, and of course, I realize in hindsight this was not a great move. But of course, that was just me being young and not knowing the people that I was dealing with.
Yeah.
I reached out to two female captains. I went and asked for advice from two different female captains.
What you would
Uh,
think, sorry not to cut you off, but what you would think is a comfortable thing to do. You're going to a supervisor, you're going to another female, and when you talk to them, it's supposed to be, I don't know where you're going to go with this, but it's supposed to be private and it's supposed to be someone that, I mean, if you're going to a captain or a chief or someone that high up, it's it's because, you need to talk to them and like it's something serious and they should take it seriously. But yeah, continue.
Yeah, so the one female captain was my day shift captain, the time that I was on day shift. And at the time she was very understanding. And it's kind of funny, and I've used this quote a couple times in my social media because it's one of those things that's like imprinted in my brain. When I told her about the sergeant and his advances on me, she goes, I wouldn't piss on him if he were on fire. Because background on that guy, old boy, he basically tried to date all the women in the police department.
Oh yeah, we all know
Long
those
story
people.
short, he blew up his own marriage by cheating on his wife with a current sergeant at the department. Ended up getting engaged to the sergeant, and then that was blew up in a fiery breakup, dumpster fire of a breakup, where him and the sergeant didn't end up getting together. And then when they broke up, that's when his advances toward me got more because then he started. I found out he tried me, one other officer, and then now his new wife, who was my academy classmate that he's married to now. So that captain was friends with the family whom he basically like blew up in like a dumpster fire because he cheated with one of them. Long story short, it's kind of hard to keep straight, but you get the point.
Yeah,
Um, so she was good friends. Like her kids grew up with their kids, like, but because of the whole cheating relationship, like it kind of blew all that up.
yeah,
So she had very passionate feelings about him because she's like, yes, like it's kind of like I take the side of this other family that he basically screwed up.
right,
And so I was like, okay, like she gets it. She knows this guy.
right,
Like
right,
she knows.
right.
Um, and she basically at the time goes, document everything, start writing it down, like even take notes of like all the stuff that's going on, this, that, and the other. And I was like, well, I haven't at the time, but I'll start now. this, that, and the other, because it's always like you can file a grievance, you can file the IA, you can go down that route if you want to. And it just, at the time, I was like, I don't feel like this is going to be worth it. I spoke with her. I spoke with another female captain who was overtraining. Um, and she didn't really give me much advice. She's like, the only thing that I have to say is that I just kept thinking, well, I'm going to be their boss one day. Like, I'm like, then they're going to have to turn around and listen to me, kind of chip on the shoulder type response. And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, that's kind of, yeah, that's kind of helpful, kind of not. But both of them had their alliances and their cliques within the department, and I assume that those cliques and everybody else heard about the conversation that we had, because unfortunately, that shift captain was my IA captain who tried my IA. That was essentially the straw that broke the camel's back that ran me out, and I was like, she's gonna have my back, like she knows the story. Um, Long story short, the IA was from that same slimy sergeant who became my captain. He went out and found a reason to write me up and throw me into an IA, which to me was unfounded. The department, of course, substantiated it for whatever reason.
Of
And
course.
it was for a common practice type thing that everybody else did, but it was only a problem when I did it, type of thing. And I thought this IA captain was going to have my back, and she basically like shook a finger at me and was like, "You should have known better." Okay. Um, so I did try to reach out to other women, especially women of rank in the department, and unfortunately it didn't do anything for me.
It sucks
Yeah.
because it's like for anybody, it's like you want to give them hope. Like you can reach out to someone and it's like you're at a dead end for the most part. And then, like you said, some of these people don't might not know if they're not a police officer yet, but like you can do like a grievance and IA, but then you're like labeled as the person who did that. And it's like you can't kind of win in some of these situations. And like the best thing to do probably sometimes is to get out. I mean, you got to protect yourself. You've got to protect your mental health.
Yeah, the
Um,
funny thing is that IA
wow.
captain, um, my husband stayed at that department for another, I think it was like a year and a half
That
before
was my
he,
next question. Like, is he
yeah,
still there?
he stayed behind, kind of waiting for his opportunity to present himself to move along, and he's now with a different
Yeah.
state agency as well.
Okay, good.
And he was able to come back and tell me that that IA captain basically sat alone in her retirement reception.
Yeah. Not
So
surprised.
if that doesn't paint a good picture, I don't know what does.
Not surprised. Not
Yeah.
surprised. So, after everything you experienced, you've taken everything and started your own business, you wrote a book, you've done so much. So, you are a coach and a trainer. You did CrossFit for many, many years in CrossFit training.
Mhm.
You help women get fit physically, but I believe you also help women mentally fit. Um, can you tell us why you started your program? What's it's about? And I love that you took like your pain into purpose and like I just think you're incredible. So can you tell us how you started that, how that vision was born and about your program?
Yeah, thank you. So I created this business as a part-time venture in January of 2022. And then between January and April is kind of when all the disciplinary issues happened. And once April hit, I finally decided to resign and then jump into my business full time. It was one of those things where I had been applying to different jobs and even looking at stuff outside of law enforcement that was still under the criminal justice umbrella. And it was just kind of the final sign of like, this isn't going to work. I got into an interview for a criminal justice instructor at like a VOTEC type school, um, and was the final two, and they chose the other person. I was like, well, what do you do? Um, and that's kind of when everything came to a head, and then I jumped. Fortunately, what I had done as far as the work goes from January to April, I was able to build a business that covered my full-time income. Um,
Amazing.
in 4 months, 3.5, 4 months, and was able to jump. Like it literally all lined up that same week, which was bizarre how that happened, but it did. So I decided to, it was kind of weird happenstance thing. I saw an ad on Facebook for a business coach. And it was one of those things, of course, as law enforcement, we look at it and go, is this a scam? Like, is this real?
Yeah.
Um, so I keep that in mind when people see me in my program. I'm like, their first thought is like, this is a scam. So it's fine. We got to get over that hurdle. And I totally get it.
Yes, we're all investigating.
Yes. So I saw an ad for a business coach. I kicked it to him. I said, "Does this look scammy to you?" He's like, "No, like I think it looks legit. Like you might try it." And I was like, at the time, I was like, "You know what? Like I have more of a background and more years of experience in nutrition and fitness right now than I do even the years I've been in law enforcement or in criminal justice, like post grad." So I'm like, okay, well, this is an interesting realization. And so, and I'd kind of done a little bit. I'd been certified to do nutrition coaching since 2020. Ironically enough, is one of those things I did in my patrol car during COVID when we were sitting in a parking lot
Yeah.
for the majority of our
Not
shift.
allowed to do anything. Yeah.
I had my Amazon tablet or whatever it is, and I was going through my nutrition cert at the time. So I'd had that cert and I had done some nutrition coaching up until that point. It was just like a one-off thing of like, hey, you want some help here? Like come be my client for 25 bucks a month or something like that. Um, and so I ended up investing in that in business coach and they helped me put together a program and kind of figure out the basics of running a business and marketing and how to create a program and price your program and all of those things. And oops.
We got dogs in the background. This is real life. No
Yeah,
worries.
still working. They'll stop in a second.
You're good. You're good.
Um, so I just got started and probably like, sorry, one second.
You're good. So, you guys, when we do these podcasts, we're doing real life stuff. Like everyone we're interviewing is like, they have their babies, their dogs. We have real life going on. So, no
Okay,
worries. You're
we got it.
good.
They're
We
chill
got
now.
lots of dogs. We got 3 dogs.
I do have 3 dogs. Yes. They scared off the flea outside. Um, so getting into the business, I'm trying to pick up where I left off. Um,
They
I
helped you put it together.
Yes. So I kind of had to bootstrap the thing and just got really gritty and was like, I don't know where this is going. It's a good thing. And finally I literally had to jump and figure out how to fly on the way down because it was a giant leap of faith of I'm leaving this job, I'm starting something new and jumping into the nutrition and fitness world. As far as helping female first responders and finding that niche, I originally was going to work with female cops. And then the business coach suggested, well, why don't you expand to female first responders? Because if we're looking at the niche itself, obviously, if you're looking at the whole population, like a female cop is a very small percentage of that. So trying to reach more people, hopefully, he's like, it would make sense for female first responders, correct? And what you do. I was like, yeah, actually it would. There's a lot of similarities. I have the law enforcement background, obviously. We work closely with the firefighters and the EMTs usually. So you're seeing them and saying hi and shaking hands or whatever on calls. So at the time, I realized I had a chip on my shoulder at the time. Obviously, I was very scorned and just in a bad place mentally. But at the same time, I was like, I can create something good that will help
Right.
these people. And also maybe I don't think I knew it at the time how much my story would be of benefit to them where I see it now and I'm able to lean into that now. But at a very basic level, help the profession be fitter and more in shape and hopefully be more safe that way. Because I think the biggest thing that you notice, obviously the first impressions are everlasting when it doesn't matter if it's a cop or if it's somebody else, but everybody hates the stereotypical fat cop. And you see it. You see it all the time. You see their stomach hanging over their duty belt. And you're just like, man, that's just like I don't want you on my calls. Like nothing against you as a person, but like this is just and as a citizen and even thinking of it from that side of things, like I wonder what they think when this big old cop comes up and they have to do CPR or something, physical. And it's like I don't even know what that impression would look like. So for me, it was almost like a safety thing of like I want people to be more safe and be more in shape so that it's not a limiting factor. The more that I've gotten into this business and been able to attend female first responder conferences and things like that, I'm starting to realize that the fitness is more of a limiting factor for getting more women into law enforcement. Um, and it makes sense because these fitness tests are outdated. They're not applicable. I've always had a problem with it because they just don't make sense.
Yeah.
And that's part of what I want to do eventually is be able to help departments create better programs for their officers and officer longevity programs
They are
where
so outdated.
Yeah, where
So,
it would be like from application to retirement of like, hey, I'm giving you a more applicable fitness test that's going to be more equal across men and women. I'll give you programming and nutrition coaching throughout the academy, and then you have like your SOPs and policies throughout the department from like academy graduation to retirement type of thing. Kind of went on a tangent there. But you were asking who it was for, I think.
yeah. And
Or
like,
did
who's the program a good fit for?
Yeah. So really what I'm looking for in a client that comes to me is that you are really wanting to be better for yourself. You're realizing you're not exactly happy where you're at. You're just kind of stuck and you know where you want to go, but you don't necessarily know how to get there. And so my program is that bridge that will help take your goals and also take into account your challenges and needs and figure out that bridge to get you to the most confident person and most confident version of yourself. A lot of women that come to me, the female first responders I work with, I do coach some men. I will get some guys who will come to me on a case by case basis and be like, I need help. Can you help me? Absolutely, I will help them. So it's not like it's that exclusive or a hard
Hmm.
line. But
Hmm.
mainly for the women, most of them are saying, hey, like I need to lose a little bit of weight. I'd love to gain some strength and muscle. But mostly for me, I want to be a role model for my kids. I want to be able to carry in my groceries when I'm 90 and live on my own. I want to be a role model for myself, for the community, for my children, for my family, and really just dig into like that, like the heart of what it is that they genuinely want to do with their careers, which I relate to so much as how I was. Like I wanted to make a huge impact and I am in a different way now because obviously it's not as a sworn law enforcement officer anymore, but I
Hmm.
get that because that was me and still is me of like I think women are badass in law enforcement and first responder fields. I know that we are compassionate, we're caring, we think differently, we can de-escalate things really well. There's a lot of strengths that we have that are outside of the physical, more so I say of like my husband, of course, I've got stories of working calls together, but he would go up and just like wrestle somebody into cuffs. I'm like, bro, that's great. I can't do that. Like,
Yeah.
if you force me to do that, I will absolutely step up and do that. But I'm gonna try to talk him down and
Yep.
just like talk him into cuffs before you're just like
Yep.
you and just like make it happen.
Yep.
So having the fitness to use and be able to use it when you need to, absolutely. But really digging into the heart of the impact that you're really trying to create for yourself, for your community, and what you want your life to look like. Because ultimately, too, we forget what life is outside of our careers, especially for the 20 years or 25 years that we're in it. It's like, well, we exist to be a cop or we exist to be X, Y, and Z. And I think I find some women struggling too with the other fact of like, well, I'm also a mother. I'm also love these hobbies. Like I also fill in X, Y, and Z. And I think a lot of where that depression, anxiety comes from is because you're just lacking that fulfillment in life in general. It's like, well, I thought I wanted this and now I have this thing and it's not what I thought it would be. And now I have all this extra stress and I'm kind of just in this hole and I'm stuck.
Yeah.
And so for me, the program essentially is kind of like reaching down and pulling them out of that hole of being stuck, um, and reaching their full potential essentially, and whatever that looks like for them. When you put the numbers to it, it's like, yes, I'd love to lose weight. I want to gain strength, like kind of those easy, I'll say easy metrics to track. But I think walking out of the program, they get much more than that as far as the perspective shifts and we don't have to be so black and white type A all the time. And maybe it's just doing the best I can with what I have. And hey, because of your program, I had a 120-pound female tell me, hey, I was able to tackle and top mount somebody and put them into cuffs. And I didn't think twice this time because I knew I was ready. So it's those personal things, it's also those professional things, and it's also just like getting and be like fuck yeah, I'm doing good today.
Yeah.
Like I showed up, I did my job. I also showed up for my family today. I'm enjoying my hobbies and my life outside of work again. And really just finding that balance and that fulfillment in life
Yeah.
again.
And you can't put a price on confidence. Like you just really can't. So for these women to feel confident, like you said, like in their abilities and just to go out there and be confident in doing what they have to do is like priceless. It
Mhm.
really is.
Yep.
So you wrote a book and we talked about it a little bit. Thriving Inside of the Thin Blue Line. Where can people find this book? And we touched on what it's about, but if you want to give us a little bit more info about the book and where we can find it.
Yes, so it's available on Amazon right now in hard copy and ebook. I need to get this up on my website as well. It's not there yet, but there will be a way that you can purchase the ebook through directly through me as well eventually. But right now it's on Amazon. That's the best place to find it. As far as the book goes, it walks through my challenges in law enforcement. It talks about the three different employers I had and also two different academies I went through. I went through a state academy and also a department specific academy.
Yeah.
So it talks about those experiences. I call out some of the downfalls in law enforcement, whether it's from a training standpoint or an environmental standpoint, and how those affected me, but also how I came out of that into where I am today with the business and my coaching program. But also it provides the resources in the book as far as where to start if you want to improve yourself with the nutrition, fitness, mindset, and mental health topics in the back of it. So it gives you a place to start and a resource as a very starting point. Whereas if you implement those things in the back of the book, you should start to see some improvement as far as more energy, feeling your clothes fitting a little bit better, dropping some pant sizes, things like that. You can see some change with the very foundations of what you need in that book.
I'm excited. I'm definitely going to grab myself a copy. Um, so if someone visits your page, reads your book, hears this podcast, what do you hope that their takeaway would be?
Yeah. So it's a couple things, and it's kind of funny you mentioned that. I have a copywriting coach who's helping me with. And she asked this question of like, she's like, what's your personal brand? Like, what do you want to put out in the world? And I'm like, well, I'm sure I put out these things, but as far as putting into words, it's a little bit, it's more
It is
challenging.
hard, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I've been leaning into the quote that came to me of "We rise by lifting others," um, and I genuinely believe that. I want people to see motivation. I want people to see inspiration. I want people to see positivity. Um, just spreading love, spreading joy, those types of things of like more of the positivity that we want to see in our own lives and in our careers, especially because law enforcement and first responder fields can become very negative and very heavy just because of what we deal with on calls and also within our departments. Unfortunately, there's a lot of, what's a good word to say? Traumatized, maybe scorned, like just hurt people in and
Yeah.
outside of our employers and on the street where it just becomes negative. So I want to be that positivity, that uplifting spirit for you, and just encourage you to do better for yourself. If I can encourage you to take that first step towards being a better, more confident version of you, then that's what I want to be here for.
I love that. And I definitely think you do that. I do. So, where can we find you online for my listeners who are listening in? If they want to go follow you, message you, grab your book, where can we find you?
Yes. So the best place, and if I didn't give this link to you, I will, so you can link it.
Yeah.
It's 50fierceandfit.com. That should populate a free shift work nutrition guide for you. So you can snag that if you'd like that. It gives the very basics, foundations of what to start doing with your nutrition if you want to start seeing improvements, as far as losing a couple extra pounds, seeing your energy levels go up, things like that. Maybe taking in your duty belt a notch or two, which always feels good,
Mhm.
instead of loosening it again, right?
Oh,
Um, so the 50fierceandfit.com, you can find that shift work nutrition guide. Also TikTok and Instagram, it's the same handle. It's 50fierceandfit. Those are probably the best two places to find me. I don't have a full website yet. That's in the works, but I have the basics out there.
yeah, you do.
And of course, the book is on Amazon.
Perfect. Thank you so, so much for your time. I know you're a busy lady and I really appreciate it. I know like you dropped so many truth bombs and like so much good advice here that this is going to be great for, I know my listeners are going to really benefit from this. So I really, really appreciate you being here. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.